A system is any set of variables in interaction, which in this context means that we're looking at a set of data and understanding how it interacts within a political framework. The human nervous system, motors and cars, the Federal Reserve, these are all systems. A system is basically a communications network where information is exchanged via input and output to advance the process of the system. Ideas from the physical sciences have been applied to social science by scholars who are looking for parallels in different types of systems. We'll be focusing on systems theory rather than systems analysis, which means examining the frameworks and methodologies for understanding the operation of political systems instead of the techniques used in evaluating them. Systems theory is a series of statements about relationships among independent and dependent variables which are assumed to interact with each other. Changes in one or more variables are accompanied or followed by changes in other variables. This idea reached its pinnacle in the 20th century. However, it is not a new idea. Thomas Hobbes wrote about systems in his book Leviathan. However, it wasn't until the 1920s that systems theory flourished under the guidance of Ludwig von Bertalanffy, who said, "The physicist, the biologist, the psychological, and the social scientist are, so to speak, encapsulated in a private universe, and it is difficult to get a word from one cocoon to the other." Bertalanffy noticed that specialization in certain fields served to fragment the scientific community. Systems theory then serves as a mediator between the different fields because the resulting analogies in systems theory aren't simply metaphors, they are rooted in the information exchanged between systems. This is because systems theory has the potential to establish approaches which emphasize the functional relationship between part and whole without sacrificing the science applicable to a specific field. Systems theory recognizes that there are similarities in systems and the problems within those systems across a multitude of fields. The term for this is isomorphism. The biology definition for isomorphism is similarity or identity of form or shape or structure, but it has also been used in math and now in political science. Principles which govern the behavior in one system can be applied to another seemingly dissimilar system, which is what systems theory seeks to do. For example, a pathologist would study the behavior of tissues to determine how cancer develops, while a biologist may look at the environmental factors that could have caused it, and a criminologist may consider crime as a cancer to society and look at the studies of the other two to determine how best to prevent it. Even though systems theory is mostly accepted in the political field, as with everything, there are critics. Some point out the difficulties in qualifying and rating ideologies. Others point out the evolution of society, which presents difficulty in comparing a country in its current form with itself from previous periods in its history. There are entire papers dedicated to critiquing David Easton's theory of political science alone. Harold and Margaret Sprout would argue against systems theorists propagating reification, that is, making an abstract thing seem concrete. They point out political systems theorists' use of organismic concepts since a social structure is only similar to an organism hypothetically. Stanley Hoffman argues that systems theories employ techniques inappropriate to political science. Because the techniques are not unique to political systems and inappropriate to provide a legitimate framework, he says the chance of predictability is greatly reduced. Systems theorists who have contributed to the political science field include Kenneth Boulding, who has attempted to classify systems according to levels of increasing complexity. The key to his theory is the amount of information necessary to the system. The simpler the system, the fewer data essential for survival, and vice versa. For example, thermostats react only to temperature, but humans are cognizant beings and can detect and then choose from all the information they are given. That's why human behavior is much more complicated. The knowledge structure behind people's actions is much more comprehensive. Difficulty in predicting behavior of more complex systems, in Boulding's eyes, would result from more information between stimulus and behavior, creating many more variables. than would exist in a simpler system, like the thermostat. He uses the term folk knowledge to describe the set of mindsets particular to members of a group, in this case, members of a political system. Decisions of political leaders conform to this folk knowledge and balance their personal view with those of the system, aka the people who represent the overall folk knowledge. This sort of disparity between personal view and folk knowledge can lead to conflict on the international level as well, as systems expand to include more diverse variables in conflict resolution. Boulding proposes two approaches in using general systems theory to organize knowledge across disciplines. The first starts with the empirical universe of disciplines, locates the general phenomena common to different disciplines, and constructs theoretical models relevant to at least two different fields of study. You would imagine parallel lines that represent different disciplines. You would then locate where your issue lies on one and look across to the other to see how that system deals with issues on a corresponding level. In Boulding's second approach, you construct a spectrum of theoretical hypotheses based on a hierarchy of complexity. The hierarchy includes the static structures that set the framework of the system, the simple dynamic systems whose motions are predetermined, the level of mechanics which depends on the transmission and interpretation of information, the open system which is self-maintaining or self-reproducing, for example, cellular structures, the genetic society level, distinguished by division of labor among differentiated yet mutually independent cells in a cell society, the animal level, where there is self-awareness and a capacity to absorb and structure information, the human level, where man possesses self-consciousness, language, and symbolism, the level of social organizations, which with the focus on a role rather than the person, and transcendental systems, which are the ultimates and absolutes and unescapable unknowables. There's also Talcott Parsons, who brings a sociological approach to action systems, which postures that an actor oriented towards attaining anticipated goals will do so by means of a standardized expenditure of energy. Since the relationship between an actor and his situation are similar across systems, Parsons says that all action occurs in a system. He focuses on the action in a societal sense. That is, he places people in both roles, that of subject and that of object. If an actor gains satisfaction in a system, he will develop a vested interest in maintaining that system. And when there is mutual acceptance of the system by the actors involved, there is equilibrium or unity, something Parsons considers important because it measures a society's ability to cope with problems that affect its structure. A person can be a member of several action systems, a family, a workplace, a nation, and to Parsons, interaction develops culture on the human level and makes determining patterns easily. Several political scientists have adapted specific systems theories. One scholar, Gabriel Allman, describes the political system as that system of interactions to be found in all independent societies, which performs the functions of integration and adaptation by means of the employment or threat of employment of more or less legitimate physical compulsion. According to David Easton, system theory is based on the idea of political life as a set of interactions embedded in and surrounded by other social systems, which constantly influence it. Easton distinguishes political interactions as those oriented principally towards the allocation of values for a society. Herbert Spiro holds that a political system is a community of people processing problems which arise when members recognize and disagree about an issue, and dispelling them by finding a solution. Karl Deutsch suggests that political systems can be categorized according to their ability to respond to demands, which are self-destroying systems, non-viable systems, viable systems, and self-enhancing systems. At the international level, it is possible to find sets of relationships that allocate values across country lines, which can draw people together in much larger numbers. The international level may present a challenge in that it is not held in universal high esteem and doesn't have central leadership. However, members of the international community make demands and consider issues with the confidence that they will be heard and considered by fellow countries. Countries' goals are their common denominator. Every political system seeks stability, flexibility, efficiency, and/or effectiveness. In the pursuit of these goals, countries exhibit a political style which are the means by which they seek to fulfill those goals. The political styles are legalism, pragmatism, ideologism, and violence. Systems theories all share a basic concern with structural functional analysis, which is the study of the performance of functions in a system. This approach assumes that it is possible to specify a pattern of behavior and to identify functional equivalents in other structural units. This approach aids in comparative analysis because it allows for functions and structures to be considered across systems. The nature of systems at an international level is such that distinctions are made by contrasting the different qualities of two things. As one international relations scholar would say, systems theory is a technique for developing an understanding of relationships among nation states, since systems theory calls for examination of linkages and recurring sequences of behavior that come from one system and affect another. The same patterns repeat even on an international level. There is a framework for organizing data, integrating variables, and introducing materials from other disciplines to link general organized concepts with empirical investigations in order to obtain a comprehensive picture. In molecular biology, this would mean that a theory of molecular structure could be turned into a model which, if correct, could be observed in the real world. There are a few elements that most international political systems theories share. Each is concerned with factors that contribute to a stability or instability in the system. There is a common concern with how the system remains in equilibrium. Each would assess the impact of mobilization and technology on units within the system, the existence and effects of domestic forces on a country's international participation, and the capacity of the international system to deal with disturbances. There are a few political systems theorists who focus on the international level. First, there's Charles A. McClellan, who pushes the theory that conditions and events in the international system result from sources generated within nations. He calls those sources subsystems within each nation's unit and provides examples such as political parties, public opinion, and interest groups. McClellan considers each nation's international behavior to be a two-way street. It takes and gives to the international environment, but the culmination of the nation's give and take creates the international system. Richard Rosecrans makes use of historical material in order to create a model for international behavior. Typically, history is frowned upon for its inability to compare across fields, and also for the subjectivity of available material. However, Rosecrans attempts to fix that issue by creating criteria and an agenda by which to conduct systems analysis. He divided Western Europe's history from 1740 to 1960 into 9 historical systems, the separation of which is marked by changes in diplomatic techniques and objectives. The elements he selected are disturbances, like ideologies, regulation mechanisms that react to those disturbances, environmental restraints that influence possible outcomes, and the outcomes themselves. George Medelsky crafted 2 models that represent each end of a spectrum spanning from agrarian to industrial societies, which make up an international system. Industrial societies have large populations, and its resources are more easily mobilized than agrarian societies. Because people's positions within industria depend on skill and achievement, it is deemed a meritocracy rather than a birthright system. A country's place in this model depends on the way it performs 4 basic functions: allocation of resources, authority, solidarity, and culture. The relationship between distribution of power and incidence of war has been the object of many theories. Bipolarity and multipolarity theories have been crafted to explain the frequency and intensity of war. Bipolarity offers only 2 poles or extremes, a characteristic which increases the chance of war. Multipolarity means that there are 4 or more centers of power, which acts to diffuse the tension that would normally exist when there are only bipolar ends to work towards. It's all about increasing the chances for countries to interact. The fewer possible interactions, the higher the likelihood of instability, even though the interaction between nations is likely to be competitive. It may seem counterintuitive, but think of it mathematically. If there are only two possible outcomes, there's a 50% chance that a party in the system will disagree. If there are four or more, the likelihood of disagreement decreases to at most 25%. Since international society and systems change, the systems and change within them are crucial focal points in international relations, and this field is unique in that the international system is characterized by variation rather than by stasis. The only thing that doesn't change is change.